Our topic today is goals versus strategic goals. Probably one of the most important topics of what you're going to be doing, because I talk a lot about vision and what you want to create and all that stuff. A lot of those things are aspirational in nature, but when the rubber hits the road, when you're actually implementing the process. But before you implement the process, you need to think about your goals. You need to think about a direction. Your vision is a general aspirational direction that you're going to go to. And I've talked about why vision is important before goals, so you can go to that training if you need to. But when the rubber hits the road, when we start to implement the goals, most people go into the wrong road. So it doesn't even matter what the doesn't even matter what the road is, what the implementation process is, what you're learning. Most people jump into the wrong road. And that's why I want to talk about strategic goal setting versus just goal setting. So as a baseline, you need to have goals. And I think people who are here listening to this, they have goals. They've had goals for most of their life. And that's why they're in a place where they're listening to something like this. And you have attained a certain level of success because of that. And so I want to kind of I don't want to dismiss that part, because that's very important. That's giving you a certain level of success. Now, here's where the problem happens. Now, I think many of us can relate to this. We've all been given this idea of, hey, when you go to school, get your education, then go get a job, then go get your family, go get your house with a picket fence and everything. Like, this is the Western model, and then work for a certain amount of years until you retire, and then you have it made. Great. Can anybody relate to that, or was I the only one who heard this? Okay, so we've all heard this process, and what that means is that we've been given a vision of a life. And this is why I work a lot of times to help you clarify what your vision is, so you don't kind of fall into that, because we all fell into that. Now, let's say you figure out what your vision is and you're going in that direction. Part of that vision building process is you're looking at your life holistically. You're looking at your business. You're looking at your contribution. You're looking at the experiences you're creating for yourself, for your family. You're looking at your growth. But as soon as you start to go to implement it, and this is the part that I want to clarify, because when people create that vision, they hope that if they visualize it, if they think about it enough, that'll happen. But when you are creating a bigger vision, it automatically increases the complexity of the goals that you have, which means that you need to think it through. That means you need to spend a little bit of time preparing. Essentially, goals are there to help you test that, because you're going to have a hypothesis that, hey, I'm going to go in this direction, so this is what I'm going to do, so it creates this thing for me. But the problem is that most people go on the wrong road, and this is where strategy comes in. How to become strategic, and what does that mean in this process? So I want you to think this through, because this is why we start with vision, the bigger picture, and then we go into, what does it mean for me to go long-term? What does it mean for you to go short-term? This is why one of two things happen. People either hit their goals. If they're ambitious enough, they will hit their goals one way or another. And the goal might be, hey, I want to make $1 million, or I want to make $20 million. Now, the end point might be, the B point might be, is I want to make $20 million or $50 million. Great. That's a great goal. Now, what they didn't do is they didn't think about why they want to make $50 million. Now, at the back of our mind, we know that, well, I want to have more time. I want to have more freedom. I want to have this, that, and the other. But here's the thing. They didn't realize that for them to make that money, there are different vehicles to do that. But are all the vehicles worth it? Or in this context, are all the roads worth it towards that? And what is it that you want specifically? And when you get specific about what matters to you, then you're going to realize, okay, maybe it's not the 50 million that I want. Maybe what I want is primarily, I want time freedom with my family. I want the option to be able to do different things. And essentially, the purpose of money is to give you options. So you need to be clear as to what are the options that you want. You might not care about a jet, but somebody else might care about a jet, because a private jet might give you the option to do a lot of amazing things, but it might not be the thing that you care about. It might be a good thing to have, but that's not the thing that's important to you. Maybe what's important to you is going to Hawaii a couple of times a year, or 3-4 times, or maybe it's important for you to live part of the year in Hawaii and part of the year somewhere else. So that's why it takes actually quite a bit of work to think through these things. So what does it mean? So when you're looking at your life long term, when you're putting yourself in that experience, you've thought about the vision. Now, that long-term picture is really important. Now you're working backwards from there. For me to actually practically do this, what are the pieces that need to come into effect? What do I need to do? And there's this idea, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, and this is part of the vision building process as well, is that be, do, have. Have you guys heard of that? Be, do, have. So a lot of people, when they want to try to achieve something, they try to do a lot of things, or they just think about what they want to have. But the progression of that might be is you need to become the kind of person who can do the things to have what you want. And if it's a business, for example, you need to become the person who has the character and the skill sets to run a business like that. So you can have a life that you're picturing. If you want $50 million, for example, there are other things in that picture other than the $50 million. You need to consider, how do you want to feel in that life? How do you want to grow? What kind of growth level do you want to be at? How do you want other people to see you around you? How do you want to feel internally? Do you want to feel at peace? Do you want to feel connected? Do you want to feel like a leader in that space? And those are important growth patterns for you. Do you want to be at peace with yourself? And this is why this is part of the vision building process, because it becomes simpler for you to answer those. And then when you're looking at that future, the first part is that growth, but then the second part might be is, what kind of people do you want to interact with in that life? So if you are at that $50 million mark, do you really want to do, what kind of life do you want to have? Who are the kind of people that you want to interact with? Are these more business people? Or is this a community that you've built? Is this a nonprofit you've built? What are the values that they have? How do you want to be with your family? How do you want to be with the people around you? Because a lot of people have, and one of the things that hold people back in this process is that when they set a big goal, they're like, well, my fear is that I might get disconnected from the people around me. Well, that just shows me that that's an important value for you. So take that into account while you're building your stuff. So that's one of the reasons why, even though I'm in a push cycle in my business, which means that I'm pushing to expand. For those who were there in the networking session last week, we talked about this a lot. One of the most important things that I've done for myself is to have that boundary for my family, because yes, I want to get to the next level in my business, but I don't want to sacrifice my family in the process. So that boundary that I have is because of a value that I have for that vision, which means that when I look to the future 5 years out, I see myself, or 10 years out, I see myself being connected to my kids. I don't see them just going off and just spending all their time with their friends. Of course, they are free to do that, but I need them to see that I was there when they needed me. I need to do my part there. And same thing with my wife. I don't want to get to 10 years from now on and I look at each other and say that I don't even know who you are, which is a very common thing that people go through. They get so busy on the business side that happens. And I also don't want to get to that point 10 years down the road and say, well, I spent all my time with my family, but they can't do anything. They don't have the resources. They don't have the means. They don't have the options. And on top of that, for example, my parents are getting older. I want to be there for them, to support them. That's a huge value. So at the back of my mind, actually at the front of my mind, I'm thinking about them. They're at an age where they're going to need more and more support as they get to their later stages in their life. I want to be there to support them, not just in terms of money, but I'm thinking in terms of time too. I want to be able to either have the resources or support them in different ways, but I want to spend time with them. So, and a lot of people might be like, oh, I can't leave my job to do this. Now, have you designed your life because of that part of your life? Only you know that. Only you know what's important to you, what you value. And this is an important piece. So when you're looking at your goals long-term, you're not just looking at, hey, I want this thing. Yes, I want $50 million, but I also want my family. I also want my sanity. But that is a big contributing factor for me, is that I don't want to wake up 10 years from now on being busy in business and I lost my soul in the process. So, and it sounds like these are like common things that people think about, but most people don't. They just set a goal and they're one-track mind, especially if you're a high achiever. You tend to focus on the one thing. I think that's great. Or you get distracted by other things because there are a lot of opportunities because you have exposure to it. But what we're not doing is, and these are the two things that we're doing the opposite. We're looking at long-term, we're not taking the important variables into account. When we're looking at short-term, we're doing too many things at the same time. The ideal is to look at the important variables. It's not that many, the core variables, which could be how you want to feel in that life, your growth, who do you want to become in that process, your higher self, who do you want to be connected to, your family, friends, and the people that you want to create a network with, what kind of business do you want to operate in, and how do you want to feel within that business or work or whatever that looks like. And then the last one might be your faith, your contribution, all that stuff. Like there are only about 3 or 4 categories. Now, within those, these are human categories. Now, you can replace business with job. You can replace faith with God with something else, but it's still your spiritual life to some degree. You can replace, I don't want a big community, but I just want my small family to be around me. You can replace pieces of it. You can strategize differently about them, but these are common categories for human beings. Usually when we're thinking about that future, we're looking at 1 or 2 things. And so the way you, and this is why it's so important to spend some time working through this, because here's what ends up happening. If we go to the road analogy, you built your car, you designed your car, it's ready to go. You've thought about all the pieces of it, and you have 20, 30 different roads in front of you. Which road are you going to go on? Well, if you've done the thinking, you'll be like, hey, this road that takes me to this direction is the best road. Now, you're not worried about the 29 other roads. You're just going to go on that one road that's going to take you towards the destination that matters to you based on the variables that you thought about. Now, for most people, they will build their car. They have the skill sets. They've become that person who can go towards that. They just randomly pick a road and go on it just because somebody else has gone on that. It might not be the right road for you. And this is why when they get to a goal, they get there like, that's it. I don't even care about this thing. Yeah, it helped me in this, but they don't feel fulfilled by it. They don't feel energized by it. They don't feel connected to it because it was not based on who they wanted to become. And this is very, very important for all of us to think about. What do you want to happen in 10 years? What do you want to happen 5 years, however you want to look at that, and you're working backwards from there. Now, keep in mind that this doesn't mean that once you pick that thing, you will stick to that. That's like so rigid that you can't move off of that. And this is a piece that's important because a lot of people will not even set long-term goals. A lot of people will not even set long-term goals because what ends up happening is their fear is, what if I change? What if my life changes? Which is a very good hesitation. It's like there's so many variables. Nobody could have predicted COVID. Like that's fine. The world would change, which means that you will pivot based on what has happened. But you know your general big picture direction. You know your strategy. Your strategy would change and limit. But when you create the bigger pieces of your long-term picture, and then it will become easier for you to make changes in the present moment. So just because you have a long-term path doesn't mean that you can't make adjustments or you can't pivot. It just gives you a general focus, an ability to see that, hey, if somebody brings an opportunity to me, I'm going to analyze it based on my vision and my strategic process. It's the same thing with your business. For example, businesses who are more successful, they tend to have 3-year vision and goals, at least, if not 5 years, if not 10 years. If you haven't read the book, Vivid Vision, please read that. It's very helpful. When you're looking at that picture, even when it comes to your business, what kind of business are you building? You're not just taking the business to a certain level of income or a certain level of profit or sales. You are also building a team around you, which means that you're also building a culture around you. So you don't just want a business that makes $100 million. You're also interacting with that team. You're also interacting with that culture. You're also, in a sense, passing down those values. You're supporting certain type of people. Yes, one of the primary important pieces of that is that you need to be able to make that profit for you to take the business to the next level. But let's say the business is built and you hate being there. What the hell is the point of that? Let's say the business constantly needs your attention. Is that the kind of business you wanted? Let's say the people in your business are the kind of people that you don't want to interact with, whether it's your team or whether it's the teams of teams, or whether it's the bigger culture that has been created that doesn't align with your values. Why did you create that business? And a lot of people don't think through this stuff, because you're not just building a business. You spend a lot of time in your business. What are you building? Same thing with your personal life. What kind of family are you building? What are the values that you passing on to the people around you? Once your community, family, and all the people that are around you is built, are you going to sit there and say, like, you know what, I hate being around these people? Well, you passed on certain things in that picture. And if you don't think about this ahead, guess what? That's why you weren't intentional about it. That's why you passed on. And this is what I mean by strategic goals, is that we need to take on the bigger picture level, you need to take the important variables into account. Then on the smaller picture, which is short-term, needs to get reverse engineered from that bigger picture. And that's what we're going to work on Thursday. So specifically, we're going to go through each of the categories. We're going to break them down for the next 5 years or 10 years for you. We're going to see what you need to be focused on each year, each month, each week for you to do that. And once you have that in place, you just need to do that once or twice. That's it. And you just need to spend a few hours once creating that. And once you create it, then the rest of it is just refining the process. Hey, is this checking in? Does this feel aligned with me? Am I still on that track? And then adjusting and moving forward, and testing and moving forward. We won't talk about the specifics of how small like goals work and how you implement it, because that's another training. But this is at a bigger picture level, and helping you understand whether it's in your business or personal life, you need to take multiple variables into account. Now, which means that your life doesn't just consist of you. It consists of the people around you. It consists of your family, your friends. It consists of your team, the collaborators that you're working with, the clients that you're working with, and the long-term picture of what you're leaving behind here. And that actually requires a little bit of thinking. So on average, I would say at least spend 2 to 4 hours on this picture, between the vision and strategy. You need to spend at least 2 to 4 hours, probably more towards the 4 hours, to create that. Once you create it, then here's the other big advantage. Once you create it, then, when we go through the process, I'll literally share my calendar, how it works, is that you've already created your plan. You don't wake up the day off and say, what the hell am I going to do? You know what you're focused on this week, next week, the week after, months out. Very, very few people have that. Most people, they're looking at, there's like, what am I doing tomorrow? Even that's a huge thing. Or the day off, they'll wake up is like, what am I focused on today? That's too late. And by the way, if you look at some of the most successful people are actually not people. They're bigger organizations. If you look at like corporations, there's some of the most successful entities. Why? Because they have long-term goals. They don't think 2 years, 3 years, they think 10 years, 20 years, if they're better businesses. And if you go into their space, they have charts after charts of strategy, and every quarter, next quarter, the quarter after, next year, what are we focused on? What's each department focused on? Now, if you come from a job world, you don't know that, because you are only seeing the small picture of what you're focused on in your department. But there are people at the higher level, they're working on the whole bigger picture and strategy and culture and all of that stuff. Now, once you jump into the entrepreneurial life or a life of freedom, you need to do that work, because nobody else is doing it for you. And this is why 90% of startups have a failure rate, because they were taught to operate like workers. And remember, we're in the middle of the year. This is the time to step back and revisit everything and look at what's actually happening. Because a lot of times we get too busy working in your business or being in your life versus stepping back 10,000 feet and looking at the whole picture.